Hi, my name is Ansley Spiegel, and I was going to talk about the Ice Palace and how I thought it kind of had like more of a story to me, or was more of like a cool writing that Fitzgerald did more than the other stories that I've read about in the book that we're reading. Um, for the Ice Palace, I really liked the storyline of how it started off with Sally Carroll and how she kind of starts off in like a small town, and it seemed as though like she really wanted a change, but she didn't really know like what was coming for her when her future kind of like unraveled. And I really enjoyed how she had her neighbors and everyone talking to her about like, well, I don't think that's what you want to do. And she was just kind of like naive and was like, no, like this is what I want to do. Like it to me felt like she needed like a new change and just wanted like a new change of scenery. But once all that happened, she realized that like the Southern will forever be her home, and like she doesn't really or didn't really need that change. And I feel as though like I can connect to this because change is always something that you can like foresee yourself wanting to do, like where you're like, oh, I want to go move here, I want to go do that, until you actually do it, and then you're like, oh wow, like maybe this wasn't for me. And I feel like change is very different for everybody, whether it's like you're a homebody and you're like, oh, I really think I'll do well. And then you end up doing that and you're like, oh, this is just not what I thought it would be. I feel like that is what played a huge role in Sally Carroll's character, as she also didn't really know what was like coming for her. So yeah, I really thought that this was like an interesting read. Um, like I wrote about, I said, it seemed as though getting deeper into the story, Sally Carroll enjoyed seeing new places, but deep down, the Southern would always remain her home. And that really stuck to me because, like, when you're in a new home, or when you go to a new place, it's kind of just like you're getting all the feelings where you're like, oh, like, it's very cool, but this doesn't feel like home. And that also really hit deep because as a freshman in college, like, I was really excited to move and, like, start a life of, like, be living on my own and stuff until I actually got there, and I was like, wow, like this is not what I thought it would be. And it kind of just hits you out of nowhere, where you have expectations, and of course your expectations are going to be like positive and like to the extent of what you're expecting and hoping for, but that's not how it's always going to be, because life gets thrown at you in so many different ways that you're not expecting, so you can't really place out your future because you never know what your future will be, and you never know what's going to happen in the future because so many things can get thrown at you that you can't control, and that's just the way that like life is. And so I really like did enjoy this story because I felt as though I had a connection to it, whereas it was also just an interesting read. And I feel like to me personally it was able to like capture the audience, I guess, more in a way than like the other short stories I read. Um, like I really enjoyed reading The Glass Bowl, or The Cut Glass Bowl, but to me that also was just kind of more of like there was just a lot going on and it wasn't as fulfilling to me as The Ice Palace was. I feel as though also the Ice Palace unfolded many different like ideas, themes, and also truths behind people. And that also comes with like just the way that life is, because you see like a lot of truths come behind people in the real world. Whereas same thing with like expecting something. Like you can't just expect something because that's just not the way life goes. And so that also comes with like the truth behind people, if that makes sense, where you're like you think of somebody this way, but then like the truth comes out of them and you're like, oh, that's just not what I was expecting. And so I feel like those kind of correlate to the idea of the Ice Palace and like how that's just not the way life is and life works. And I think that Fitzgerald was really trying to cultivate that and like try and connect that in a way to show that like it's not always what you seem, or it's not always what it seems or what you will expect, and you kind of just have to go at it like, oh, like okay. And obviously like in the end, like Sally Carroll realized like this life wasn't like this new atmosphere and new life wasn't for her, and she just wanted to go back home. And that's another thing that hit really deep, because like home is always like what makes me feel safe, and I think what anyone would feel safe would be their home, for most people. And so that really played a huge role for Sally Carroll, because in the end she was just like, I just want to go home. Like she feels more safe at home, and it just wasn't what she was expecting, especially with like I can't really remember his name, but the guy she was going with, and her world just kind of unfolded in a way she didn't see it happening. So, as I also wrote, I said, as someone who is so eager to wonder what the exciting future will look like in new places and new beginnings, once that reality hits, change is hard. And that goes to show that sometimes leaving your roots and normality behind isn't for everyone. And I relate to that because obviously it gets better. For me, that was college. Like, I moved in and I had a lot of high expectations, but obviously they didn't set in right away. I had to get used to it and had to grow on me. And I feel as though that is kind of like the general idea of what the Ice Palace was about. You know, like once reality sets in, you either are like, oh, this is what I was wanting, or it's not what you were wanting. And I think Fitzgerald does a good way of, or has a good way of showing that through that short story. So I hope all of that made sense. Thank you.